This is Casey Capercioni presenting Action Research Multimedia Presentation. The statement of my research problem. The statement I have encountered is finding and implementing a classroom management strategy that preventatively avoids classroom disruption, assists in transitions, and encourages student-teacher respect in a variety of different classrooms. Through my research, I hope to find a strategy that can be tweaked and modified in order to fit a variety of diverse classrooms with students of all ages. My intention behind choosing this question is my own personal growth as a teacher, as management is something I have been working towards. In the near future, I hope to be in the position of occasional teacher, and to do this, I need to have strategies in place that allow me to control a variety of classrooms. My research question. Specifically, I wanted to ask what kind of strategies can I implement to avoid students being disruptively loud, and how can I manage transitions easier? Also, how can I encourage students to move through those transitions in a quick way? The definitions of central and relevant terms. So my keywords were classroom management, transitions, behavioral strategies, discipline, inclusion, differentiation, and positive. Next, I'm going to go into my literature annotated bibliography. My first resource was a resource I found online, and it was a narrative analysis of teachers' reactive classroom management strategies as reported by students with ADHD specifically. So as we know, ADHD is a hyperactive disorder that plagues many students, and it features students that cannot really sit still very often. It's one of the biggest symptoms that they have from ADHD, and because of this, they may be the students that struggle with transitioning. So this journal specifically for me was very important because it was a demonstration of inclusion and a demonstration of differentiation in research and in background information to build on my question. And I think if I were to continue performing this research, I would want studies that looked at multiple students and wanted to ensure that I had resources that featured a variety of learners. This journal was done in Finland, and it's from 2016. The main argument of this journal is to detail the way students felt about their teacher dealing with their misbehaviors, or generally dealing with the teacher's authority in the classroom. This case study is unique in the fact that it places the student's voice at the forefront of the research, which is not something we often see in education. It truly took one-on-one time to interview the students, and that makes this a very reliable resource because it's putting our students first, which is something we always want to do as educators. The authors of the study placed the teachers in the center of the blame, which was interesting because it kind of created a weird vibe of the students' actions being justified, and that's not always the case in every situation. So it's relevant to the research, but I also wanted to be aware of the fact that it was a little bit of a one-sided way to view classroom management. Resource 2. So this was a study from Vietnam in 2016, and it said it's called Coping Styles with Student Misbehavior as Mediators of Teacher Classroom Management Strategy. And this was intermediate level students, so that makes the data very relevant to me as a junior intermediate teacher, and the article details how teachers who use classroom techniques such as aggression, punishment, reward, and recognition and hinting, those are all the things that they discuss in the article, and some of them work better than others. So this article really went into how recognition, reward, discussion, and hinting received the best responses from students. Specifically, things like hinting and recognition and reward, those are more positive ways to deal with classroom management disruptions. And so in order according to the study, in order to have successful transitions, we should be using more positive feedback for students. And this was a really great resource for me. It really was the forefront of my exploration into further research on this topic for myself as an educator. And the last resource was actually something that was quite interesting in my opinion. It was a resource that's called Effective Classroom Management and Air Traffic Control Analogy. So this is an analogy for what classroom management is. And the entire article, it's only about 2 or 3 pages, but throughout it, it just discusses the way that we can use air traffic control as an analogy for classroom management and how hectic that can be, how time-consuming it can be, how many people are involved in air traffic control, how dangerous it is, and it really opened up my eyes, and it was a really great way to explain classroom management to someone who maybe doesn't have classroom management skills or isn't directly a teacher. Maybe they're an EA, maybe they're just someone who works in the school in a different capacity. So it was very accessible, and that's what I would want my research to be, accessible to everyone, not just teachers, because maybe these strategies could be used in an office building or in a daycare or anywhere else that people need to be managed for public safety. My literature summary is up next, and I have here my 3 resources cited appropriately, and then I put it into subsections. So classroom management has profound effects on our students, and we are not aware of the full extent of these effects. Choosing an appropriate response to misbehaviors can influence student lives. Classroom management is like trying to control several planes flying through the windy night sky. Using a variety of techniques will allow for smoother transitions. Students respond better to positive classroom management techniques. So for this, I just read the main subsection headings because I do have quite long paragraphs here, so I'm going to keep moving on. My research action plan. So my data sources. I will use my observational notes for my grade 5-6 class, my grade 3 class, and my fellow teacher candidates' classrooms. So I have some data on this already, and I want to implement that. If I were to continue this, I would want a checklist with the teachers, and other teacher candidates, of course, because they have all of their box to pull experience from in a variety of different schools, which can be extremely valuable. So I would want to have a checklist that asked, frequently, very frequently, not frequently at all questions, and then they would put a checklist, put a check mark in the section that they felt they were doing. So an example question could be, did you use hinting at all in the last month in your classroom? Do you feel like you use positive or negative feedback more often? And things like that. The second part I would want to include is a questionnaire for students that explains their perspective of classroom management strategies. So like I discussed when talking about the first article that I read, I would want to put students' opinion in my presentation. I would want my data to include student voice as much as possible. Next up is triangulation, validity, and reliability. So I triangulated my data by using 3 sources. The variety of sources is adding more richness and variety into my data. And then I tried to use, I think that for reliability and validity, it's really important to use the same class for an entire year, if at all possible. The second thing is multiple scenarios, so multiple different transitions with multiple different teachers during Rotary, just to see if there's any bias and there's any other things that are going on to influence student behavior and classroom management strategies that are being implemented. And then multiple different sources and perspectives. I hope to erase obvious biases and increase the reliability of data. So student-teacher relationships sometimes can be complicated, and sometimes students just have bad days, sometimes teachers have bad days. I want to have multiple sources from the same people in order to increase the validity and reliability overall. Next up is participants and setting. So my participants are the students, other teachers, my colleagues, and The data will be collected at elementary schools throughout Ontario. Ethical considerations. So I'll be changing names and leaving school names out to ensure that my students' confidentiality is met. That means that all names ever referenced, student, teacher, anyone in it would have their name changed before it was published, and school names would be completely left out so that it could never be tracked back to the school. Next up is the timeline chart. My data collections process. So type of data that I'm using: anecdotal notes, teacher journals, teacher checklists, teacher interviews, and student questionnaires. All of these should be done approximately once a week from September, October to June, end of year. Beginning of year to end of year. I would want it to last all year as far as collection of data. Other things like teacher interviews would probably only happen once a month or at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. Because of time, it would just be very time consuming. And then I would want teachers to do a monthly reflection on how, after reading over their anecdotal notes, I would want them to do a monthly reflection and just acknowledge that the things that they felt like they were doing, have that moment of reflection within themselves. So, last up is closure, and the study would support my knowledge of teaching by giving me further strategies to implement when deciding upon a classroom management strategy. Having the background knowledge of this study would allow me to be able to carry out several different strategies to see what works best in the classroom.